It was just past midnight when the first whispers of disaster started trickling through the corridors of Buckingham Palace. A single phone call had thrown the entire royal household into chaos. "It's Harry," a voice trembled over the line. "He's been in an accident." That was all anyone knew. No details, no context, just 4 words that could shatter a family and send the world into a state of shock. Imagine the panic. Imagine the disbelief. For decades, the public has seen the prince as larger than life, a figure seemingly untouchable by the mundane or tragic. And yet, in a single heartbeat, all of that facade crumbled. Could one man, one accident, truly shake the foundations of the British monarchy? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Outside, the streets of London were eerily quiet. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the slick pavement from a recent rain. Somewhere in the city, sirens screamed into the night, slicing through the calm with a sense of urgent inevitability. Inside the palace, however, a storm of emotion raged. King Charles, normally composed, paced the corridors in anguish. Kate Middleton, usually the embodiment of grace under pressure, was gripping her hands so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Prince William, heart heavy and jaw clenched, could barely contain the wave of helplessness washing over him. "We are losing him," he whispered into the silent air, a phrase that seemed too raw, too real for the public to ever fully understand. But here's the thing about crises in the royal family. Appearances are everything. Public perception, media narratives, and the carefully curated image of unity all hang by a thread when tragedy strikes. And while the cameras weren't rolling this time, the emotional reality was far messier, far more human than anyone could imagine. The family had spent years dealing with scandals, separations, and betrayals. But nothing, not Meghan, not the Oprah interview, not even years of media scrutiny, had prepared them for the prospect of losing a son, a brother, a future king in all but title. Prince Harry's life has always been public property. Every move, every relationship, every decision has been analyzed, criticized, celebrated, and dissected by millions. Yet in the span of a few hours, all that scrutiny became meaningless. What mattered now wasn't who he had married, which controversies he had survived, or how many charities he supported. It was simply whether he would survive this night. And the answer was not yet clear. Let's rewind for a moment. It wasn't just any ordinary day that led to this calamity. Harry had been attending a series of private engagements in London, commitments that were designed to keep him connected to the United Kingdom, even after years of self-imposed exile in California. The tension had been palpable for weeks, tensions fueled by a combination of family estrangement, media speculation, and personal pressures that the average person could barely comprehend. On the surface, Harry appeared composed, even upbeat, but those closest to him had noticed something different. A restlessness in his eyes, a distracted energy, and perhaps, most concerning, a sense of inevitability, as if he sensed that something monumental was about to occur. When the accident happened, it was sudden and violent. Details were scarce at first, and the British press, eager for scoops, began circulating half-truths and speculation. Some claimed it was a minor collision, others insisted it was far more serious. Inside the palace, however, the truth was known. The prince's condition was critical. Doctors were doing everything they could, but nothing about the situation was predictable. Every heartbeat, every breath, became a moment of suspense. For the royal family, it was not just a medical emergency. It was an emotional cataclysm. Charles, William, and Kate had spent the early hours making impossible decisions. Who would see Harry first? How would they manage the media? How could they convey support and stability while grappling with the terror that one of their own might not survive? Every conversation was laced with fear. Every decision carried consequences that went beyond the palace walls. And yet, as they waited outside the emergency room doors, the real horror began to set in. The family was not just confronting an accident. They were confronting the fragility of life itself. For the public, the news of Harry's accident sent shockwaves across social media. Millions of messages poured in, from fans, from critics, from people who had never even met the man, but felt a deep connection to him through decades of royal coverage. Everyone had questions. Everyone wanted answers. And yet, amidst the speculation and hysteria, a deeper narrative was unfolding behind the palace gates, a narrative of love, fear, betrayal, and secrets that had been buried for years. Secrets that would soon surface in ways no one could anticipate. What makes this story more compelling is not just the accident itself, but what it reveals about the people closest to Harry. The public has often seen a polished veneer. The smiling family portraits, the ceremonial waves, the media-friendly statements. But in private, the royal household is a labyrinth of tension, complex emotions, and unspoken grievances. This accident became the mirror through which every rivalry, every regret, every fractured relationship, was reflected in its starkest form. Even as the hours ticked by, the palace was a theater of extreme emotion. Nurses whispered urgent instructions. Advisors tried to maintain composure, knowing that one leak, one misstep, could ignite a firestorm in the press. And the family? They were on the verge of breaking. William paced the corridors, muttering under his breath. Kate sat silently, tears streaking her face, though she tried to mask them from the eyes of those around her. Charles, faced with the terror of potentially losing his youngest son, felt the weight of decades of duty collide with raw, unfiltered parental fear. And the world watched. Overnight, Harry became more than a prince. He became a symbol, a reminder of mortality, of human vulnerability, of the unexpected turns that can redefine lives in an instant. Yet, in all the speculation, one question lingered. What had truly caused the accident? Was it a simple lapse in attention? A mechanical failure? Or something far more complex? Something tied to the pressures, controversies, and hidden tensions that had shadowed Harry's life for years? As we dive deeper into this story, it's not just about an accident. It's about the collision of public image and private reality, of duty and desire, of love and fear. It's about the raw human emotion that lies beneath the carefully curated royal facade. And it's about the events that unfolded in the hours, the minutes, the seconds after the crash. Moments that would challenge everything the family believed they knew about themselves, about each other, and about what it truly means to be part of the royal family. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started like any other day, or at least, it seemed that way on the surface. London's skyline shimmered in the early evening light, unaware that a moment of tragedy was about to unfold on its streets. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, had spent the afternoon in private meetings with charity leaders, shaking hands, giving smiles, and performing the carefully choreographed gestures of royalty. To anyone watching, he looked composed, even relaxed. But those who truly knew him, the aides, the close friends, the few family members still in touch, could sense something different that day. There was a tension in his jaw, a flicker in his eyes, a subtle impatience that hinted at deeper unrest. By all accounts, he was driving home from Kensington Palace, navigating through the familiar streets that he had known since childhood. Yet on that evening, fate seemed determined to intervene. Witnesses later described a blur of motion, a sudden swerve, a screech of tires, the startling sound of metal against metal. Cars stopped. Pedestrians froze. And at the center of it all, Prince Harry's vehicle had collided with another, leaving behind a scene that would soon dominate headlines around the world. What made the moment so shocking wasn't just the collision itself, it was the context. For years, the public had followed every detail of Harry's life. His marriage, his departure from royal duties, his struggles with media intrusion, all of it had been catalogued. But nothing had prepared anyone for the sheer terror of seeing him in real, immediate danger. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a surreal calm. Emergency responders arrived quickly, sirens blaring, their faces grim, but focused. They worked with a precision honed over countless crises, yet the stakes had never been higher. Inside the car, Harry was conscious but disoriented. Pain radiated through his body in sharp, unexpected bursts, and for a moment, it seemed as though the world had narrowed down to the simple act of breathing. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Questions, regrets, fears. Will they be okay? He wondered, not about himself, but about the family he had left behind, about William, Kate, and Charles, about the fragile threads of connection that still bound him to them. Every second was both agonizingly long and impossibly fast. The accident was not just a physical event, it was a psychological earthquake. Witnesses described the scene outside as surreal, bystanders taking out their phones, some crying, some shaking their heads, some frozen in disbelief. The collision had caused minor injuries to other drivers, but the focus, naturally, was on Harry. The police cordoned off the area, and the news began to spread like wildfire through social media and traditional media outlets. Within minutes, speculation was rampant. Was it a mechanical failure, reckless driving, or something more sinister? Back at the palace, the initial moments of uncertainty were even more dramatic. A single message arrived. Harry had been in an accident. No further details. No assurances. Just a fragment of information that sent the royal family into an immediate state of alarm. Charles, William, and Kate were summoned to the emergency room, their minds racing with fear, anger, and anticipation. Every step they took toward the hospital seemed weighted with the knowledge that life could change irrevocably in a matter of moments. As the minutes ticked by, more information began to trickle in. Paramedics reported that Harry had sustained several injuries, some potentially severe, but that he was stable. It was a phrase that offered both reassurance and terror simultaneously. For Charles, the thought of losing his youngest son was unbearable. For William, it was a stark reminder of their shared vulnerabilities, of the fragility that life imposed even on those who seemed untouchable. And for Kate, the image of a family in crisis brought forth waves of empathy, fear, and protective instinct that she struggled to contain. But what really escalated the situation was the media. As expected, reporters descended on the scene, cameras flashing, microphones poised, each outlet eager to capture the first narrative, to define the story before anyone else could. Social media amplified every rumor, every snippet of unverified information, and soon the entire world felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for news. Amidst the chaos, a series of private phone calls began to unravel the hidden dynamics of the royal family. Advisors and aides reached out to ensure that the family was informed, that security protocols were in place, and that the narrative, at least the official one, remained controlled. But control, as they quickly realized, was an illusion. Emotions were raw, and in the face of potential tragedy, no amount of protocol could suppress fear. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked frantically, assessing every injury, every fracture, every bruise. Harry, always resilient, tried to maintain a composed demeanor, cracking brief, self-deprecating jokes to mask his pain. Yet even he could not ignore the severity of the situation. The adrenaline, the shock, the realization that he was vulnerable. All of it combined to create a psychological tension that few outside the palace could ever comprehend. And while the hospital staff focused on physical healing, the emotional crisis was just beginning. Charles paced the waiting area, wringing his hands, muttering under his breath. William alternated between silent brooding and frantic questioning. Kate tried to offer calm, but her composure was fraying with each passing minute. There was no way to shield themselves from the raw, unfiltered terror of potentially losing a loved one. It was in those hours that the deeper fractures in the family's relationships became evident. Old grievances resurfaced, minor disputes escalated, and every unspoken word seemed magnified by the intensity of the moment. Harry, lying in a hospital bed, was not only facing his own mortality but the ripple effects his accident would have on the people who loved him most. In that sense, the accident was more than a collision of metal and concrete. It was a collision of past tensions, unhealed wounds, and fragile human emotions. Outside, the world waited. Headlines appeared, some factual, some speculative. Social media exploded with messages of concern, conspiracy theories, and conflicting reports. The public, accustomed to seeing Harry in a certain light, a charismatic, fearless figure, now confronted a reality that was far more human, far more vulnerable. And yet, even in the chaos, there was a collective sense of fascination, a need to understand, to witness, to connect with the drama unfolding thousands of miles away from their own lives. Every second that passed seemed to stretch indefinitely, and then, as if the night itself had decided to add another layer of tension, new developments emerged. A crucial detail about the accident, previously undisclosed, came to light. It hinted at circumstances more complex than anyone had imagined, circumstances that would later spark debates, speculation, and even controversy. Was this truly an accident? Or was there an undercurrent of decisions, pressures, or actions that had led to this moment? The family's emotional response intensified with every update. Charles's face, normally composed under scrutiny, reflected fear and helplessness. William's hands clenched and unclenched as he struggled to maintain his composure. Kate's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she attempted to support her husband and the family while grappling with her own grief. In private, advisors whispered about the implications, the public image, and the potential fallout. And yet, all of that seemed almost irrelevant compared to the raw human fear that gripped the family in those first hours. At the heart of this story is not merely an accident. It is about how a single moment can ripple outward, touching countless lives, revealing hidden truths, and forcing people to confront realities they had long avoided. The accident became a lens through which every relationship, every past decision, and every hidden tension in the royal family was suddenly magnified. For Harry, it was a reminder of mortality and fragility. For Charles, William, and Kate, it was a confrontation with love, loyalty, and the limits of control. As night turned into early morning, the situation remained tense. Doctors provided updates, security ensured privacy, and the family continued to wrestle with fear and hope simultaneously. But the next events, the ones that would truly shock the palace, the public, and the world, were yet to come. The initial accident had set the stage, but it was only the beginning. And then came the message that would change everything. A revelation so unexpected, so emotionally charged, that it would redefine the narrative surrounding the night's events and set in motion a chain of reactions that no one could have predicted. What it contained, who delivered it, and how it would be received would not only test the family's resilience, but would force the public to question everything they thought they knew about Prince Harry, his relationships, and the fragile world of the British monarchy. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment the news of the accident reached Buckingham Palace, time seemed to stop. In an instant, the meticulously ordered world of the royals, so carefully choreographed for public eyes, collapsed into chaos. King Charles, normally measured and deliberate, felt an unfamiliar surge of panic that clawed at his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to control, to protect, but there was nothing he could do except wait. Wait for news. Wait for reports. Wait for confirmation that his youngest son, the boy he had watched grow from a mischievous toddler into a public figure, would survive. William's reaction was no less visceral. The elder brother, who had often carried the weight of responsibility with stoic determination, now found himself consumed by fear. Every second without information felt like an eternity. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios, replaying moments from Harry's life, wondering if the accident could have been avoided, questioning whether he should have been there to prevent it. He clenched his jaw until it ached, paced the marble floors of the palace, and muttered under his breath, a mix of frustration and helplessness. Kate Middleton, ever the picture of poise, became the emotional anchor for the room, but the strain was evident. Her hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as she grasped at her husband's arm. Her eyes, normally calm and observant, betrayed the worry she fought so hard to conceal. In private, she allowed herself to cry, a release for the tension that threatened to overwhelm her. The cameras wouldn't see this side of the Duchess. The world would never witness the raw vulnerability of a woman who, for all appearances, maintained composure in the face of crisis. But even as emotions ran high, there was a deeper layer of tension at play. This was more than fear for Harry's life. It was a confrontation with the fragility of their family bonds. For years, there had been unspoken rivalries, old wounds, and simmering resentments that had been carefully managed, if not fully reconciled. And now, in the shadow of potential tragedy, all of that resurfaced. Every interaction, every glance, every word carried weight far beyond the moment. Aide after aide arrived to provide updates, to deliver the latest information from the hospital, to coordinate logistics and security. Every phone call, Every report was a reminder of how high the stakes were. The palace staff moved efficiently, but beneath the surface, the fear was palpable. Staff whispered about protocols, about how to handle the media frenzy that was sure to erupt, and about how to support the family without adding to the emotional strain. Even the most seasoned advisors, who had weathered countless crises, admitted privately that this situation was unprecedented. In the first hours, the family clung to fragments of hope. Doctors reported that Harry was stable, that his injuries, while serious, were being managed effectively. But stability in a crisis is a precarious thing. It offers comfort, yes, but it also highlights the precariousness of life, the ever-present possibility that the situation could shift in an instant. Every report of progress was met with cautious relief, every update of concern with renewed anxiety. The palace itself became a stage for heightened emotion. In one room, Charles paced with barely contained dread. In another, William stood by the window, staring out at the city he had once patrolled as a protective older brother, feeling powerless. Kate moved between them, offering reassurance, a calm voice, a steady presence, while wrestling with her own fear. The emotional resonance of the moment was so intense that even the walls seemed to absorb it, echoing the quiet panic of a family confronting potential loss. The news also sparked a wave of private conversations that exposed the raw truth behind royal life. Advisors and family members discussed what steps to take if the worst happened. They debated public statements, privacy measures, and how to shield the world from the emotional reality inside the palace. Every decision, no matter how small, carried consequences that could ripple outward, shaping public perception and historical record alike. Meanwhile, the world outside was watching. Social media exploded with speculation, concern, and conspiracy theories. News outlets scrambled to verify reports, many of them posting incomplete or inaccurate details. The public, conditioned to watch Harry as a celebrity figure as much as a royal, felt a mixture of fear, fascination, and helplessness. The accident had transformed him from a distant public persona into a figure of urgent human concern, a reminder that no amount of status or privilege could insulate someone from the fragility of life. Within the palace, private phone calls carried even more tension. Friends and family abroad reached out, their voices anxious, seeking reassurance. Some offered support, some sought clarity, and some inadvertently added to the stress, forcing Charles, William, and Kate to navigate a delicate balance between honesty and protection. Every conversation, every response, was a test of emotional resilience, a negotiation between transparency and shielding the truth. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, moments of human connection shone through. William, in a rare display of vulnerability, held Charles's hand, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared concern and familial bond. Kate whispered reassurances, her tone steady even as her heart raced. They were united in their fear, their love, and their determination to be there for Harry, no matter the outcome. These moments, though fleeting, were the threads of humanity that wove through the tapestry of royal protocol, reminding them, and us, that behind the titles, behind the public image, there are real people confronting real fear. As the night wore on, tension escalated with each update. Doctors delivered cautious reports, each one a mix of hope and worry. The family's emotional responses intensified with every word. There were tears, whispered prayers, quiet sobs that went unnoticed by anyone but those closest to the scene. Every heartbeat felt magnified, every moment stretched into eternity. And all the while, the palace staff moved efficiently, silently absorbing and responding to the emotional intensity surrounding them. It was in these hours that one of the most critical developments occurred. A private message, delivered discreetly, revealed information about the circumstances of the accident that no one had anticipated. The revelation was subtle but seismic. A factor previously unknown, a decision, a distraction, or perhaps a hidden element in the environment, had contributed to the event. This detail, though not immediately disclosed to the public, sent ripples through the family. Charles's jaw tightened, William's eyes narrowed, and Kate's hands clutched her chest. The hidden complexity of the situation added another layer of emotional burden. transforming fear into a cocktail of anxiety, guilt, and frustration. The palace became a pressure cooker of emotion. Every conversation, every glance, every pause carried weight. Charles struggled to maintain composure, feeling the full force of parental terror. William, torn between protective instinct and the urge to act, wrestled with frustration and helplessness. Kate, a pillar of support, had to balance her own fear with the need to be present for both men. The dynamics of power, responsibility, and family bonds were under extreme stress, revealing cracks and resilience in equal measure. By the early morning hours, a pattern had emerged. The family was unified in purpose but fractured by emotion. Love and fear intertwined, creating a high-stakes environment where every word mattered. Advisors and staff worked tirelessly to navigate logistics, communication, and emotional support. And in the middle of it all, Harry, the catalyst of the crisis, remained at the center, conscious, in pain, but resilient. And yet, even as the family grappled with these immediate emotional challenges, another layer of complexity was looming, one that would test loyalties, reveal hidden truths, and force the royals to confront realities they had long avoided. There were conversations yet to be had, decisions yet to be made, and secrets yet to surface. The initial shock of the accident had passed, but the deeper emotional and relational fallout was just beginning to unfold. What happened next behind the closed doors of the hospital and the palace, the private moments of fear, regret, and revelation, would set the stage for conflicts and reconciliations that no one anticipated. And the question lingered. How would the royal family navigate this crisis, not just in public, but in the quiet, unobserved spaces where raw emotion and human vulnerability collide? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment the emergency call came in, everything moved with precision, urgency, and a sense of controlled chaos. In London, paramedics are trained to react to crisis with speed and expertise, but this was no ordinary emergency. The patient was Prince Harry, a member of the royal family, whose life was suddenly in jeopardy. Sirens screamed through the streets, echoing off buildings and cutting through the night air, as the ambulance raced toward the accident scene. Every second mattered. Every choice, when to stop, how to stabilize, what to prioritize, could determine whether he survived. At the scene, the first responders faced a tableau of tension and confusion. Bystanders had gathered, some in shock, some recording every moment on their phones. There was a crunch of twisted metal, the faint smell of smoke, and the unmistakable signs of impact. Amidst it all, Harry was conscious, groaning, trying to assess the damage to his own body. Pain radiated sharply from multiple points, yet his instinct was to move, to check others, to understand what had happened. The paramedics gently restrained him, immobilized his neck, and began assessing injuries, their voices calm but urgent. Time became an elastic, almost surreal concept. To Harry, every second felt drawn out, yet in reality, only minutes had passed. His mind raced through a litany of thoughts, questions about the accident, about his own decisions leading up to it, about whether the family would be able to process the outcome, all collided in his consciousness. The adrenaline surged, masking some of the pain but amplifying the fear. He had survived dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. A moment where control, power, and fame meant nothing, and the fragility of life was impossible to ignore. Inside the ambulance, the medical team worked with meticulous precision. Monitors were attached, for lines inserted, oxygen administered. Every vital sign was recorded, every subtle change noted. Harry, aware of the attention yet too disoriented to fully comprehend it, asked questions between shallow breaths, some coherent, some fragments. "Is everyone okay?" he managed to ask, his voice strained. The paramedics offered reassurance, professional but human, a rare blend of clinical detachment and empathy. Meanwhile, news of the accident had already begun to filter back to the palace. Charles, William, and Kate had been informed of the emergency, and the immediate response was a mixture of shock, fear, and a desperate need for updates. Advisors whispered updates, trying to manage the flow of information, but in these early hours, certainty was impossible. Every detail mattered, and yet, clarity was scarce. The family, accustomed to public appearances and ceremonial poise, were now confronting raw vulnerability, a scenario that no rehearsal or protocol could have prepared them for. At the hospital, Harry was transferred into emergency care. Doctors moved swiftly, assessing injuries, ordering scans, and coordinating surgical teams. The room was tense, a quiet storm of activity as medical professionals focused on stabilizing him. Every fracture, every contusion, every subtle indication of internal damage was evaluated with precision. But even in the midst of clinical efficiency, the human element was undeniable. Nurses whispered reassurances. Technicians worked tirelessly, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. And Harry, though in pain, remained alert enough to process fragments of conversation, sensing the urgency and stakes without fully comprehending the breadth of his condition. The family, waiting anxiously in the corridors outside, experienced every moment in sharp emotional relief and anxiety. Charles paced, muttering under his breath, trying to maintain composure yet failing to mask his fear. William alternated between silent contemplation and restless pacing, struggling with the helplessness that comes when you are close to someone you love but powerless to affect the outcome. Kate, ever the anchor, moved silently among them, offering quiet reassurances, her own emotions simmering beneath the surface. The first updates from the medical team were cautiously optimistic but filled with caveats. Harry had multiple injuries, some severe, others less critical, but there were no signs of immediate life-threatening trauma. Every report, however, came with uncertainty. Doctors were clear that the next several hours would be crucial, and that recovery would require both medical intervention and vigilance. For the family, optimism and fear existed side by side, a precarious balance that magnified every heartbeat and every breath. And yet, even as doctors worked to stabilize Harry's physical condition, the emotional drama of the moment was equally intense. In the quiet spaces of the hospital, private conversations unfolded. Security personnel coordinated with family members. Advisors deliberated on public statements. The royals wrestled with questions that were impossible to answer. How much information should be released? How should they balance transparency with protection? How could they manage not just Harry's recovery, but the ripple effects of the accident on the public perception of the family and the monarchy? The media frenzy, meanwhile, was relentless. News outlets broadcast live from outside the hospital, speculating on Harry's condition, analyzing accident photos, and interpreting every statement or gesture from the family. Social media amplified every rumor, every fragment of information, creating an environment where truth and speculation were indistinguishable. The public, conditioned to follow every detail of Harry's life, was suddenly confronted with the raw reality of vulnerability. A reminder that no status, title, or fame could shield anyone from the unpredictable dangers of life. In this high-pressure environment, small moments of humanity stood out starkly. Nurses gently reassured Harry, offering brief smiles, subtle touches, and words of encouragement. Doctors collaborated with intensity, sharing updates with each other and with the family, striving to maintain both professional efficiency and empathy. Even amidst chaos, there was a shared sense of purpose. To preserve life, to mitigate pain, and to navigate a crisis that touched not just a patient, but a family and a global audience. But as hours passed, a critical complication arose. A subtle but concerning change in Harry's vital signs prompted immediate attention. Doctors debated interventions, weighing the risks and benefits of various procedures. The family, now fully aware of the fragility of the situation, was forced to confront the possibility that the night could take a darker turn. Every decision, every second, carried profound emotional and practical consequences. Amidst the clinical urgency, there were moments of stark vulnerability. William, standing outside the ICU, whispered prayers, his voice barely audible. Kate, sitting nearby, allowed herself a tearful release, drawing strength from the act. Charles, pacing the waiting area, reflected on decades of love, mistakes, and regrets, realizing in a stark, painful moment how much he feared losing the son who had always been both a source of joy and a reminder of the passage of time. And then came the first hint of a revelation that would complicate everything further. A subtle detail about the accident, overlooked in the immediate scramble of emergency response, began to emerge. A factor that hinted at circumstances far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Was it a mechanical failure, human error, or something else entirely? The ambiguity added another layer of stress to an already fraught situation. The family, already on edge, had to absorb this news while maintaining composure in a space where every word mattered and every reaction could have consequences. Through the night, the narrative continued to unfold. The medical team worked tirelessly, stabilizing Harry, monitoring his progress, and preparing for possible interventions. The family remained in a delicate balance of hope and fear, drawing strength from one another while navigating the raw edges of anxiety. The public remained captivated, the media relentless, and the palace staff vigilant, all contributing to a high-stakes environment where the stakes were nothing less than life, legacy, and love. Yet, even as Harry's physical condition was addressed, the psychological and emotional layers of the crisis deepened. What would the accident reveal about family dynamics, loyalty, and the pressures of life in the public eye? How would old grievances resurface under the strain of fear and uncertainty? And how would Harry, confronted with both physical pain and the emotional weight of the event, navigate the next phase of his life? Recovery, reflection, and the inevitable questions about what had led to this moment? The emergency response and hospital drama were just the beginning. What transpired in those hours behind closed doors, conversations, confessions, and revelations, would not only shape Harry's recovery, but also alter the dynamics of the royal family in ways that no one, not even the most seasoned observers, could have anticipated. The delicate dance between duty, love, and human vulnerability had begun, and the consequences would reverberate far beyond the walls of the hospital. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. As soon as news of Prince Harry's accident hit the airwaves, the world erupted. The story traveled faster than any royal announcement before, propelled by social media, 24-hour news channels, and the insatiable appetite of the public for every detail of Harry's life. Within minutes, hashtags began trending on Twitter. Hashtag Prince Harry accident. Hashtag royal emergency. Hashtag pray for Harry. Within hours, memes, speculation threads, and videos of the accident scene flooded feeds around the globe. The intensity of the coverage was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters camped outside the hospital, some attempting to catch glimpses of the royal motorcade, others speculating on the severity of Harry's condition. Drone footage hovered in the distance, capturing the ambulance, the traffic chaos, and the surrounding streets. Every movement was dissected in real time, every detail analyzed for signs of distress or deception. The world had become a silent participant in a story that, for the family, was intensely private. News outlets, competing for scoops, fueled a storm of speculation. Headlines screamed of near-death experiences, potential life-altering injuries, and even conspiracy theories about the accident. Some suggested that Harry's high-profile lifestyle and recent controversies had somehow contributed to the incident. Others posited that it was entirely accidental, the unfortunate convergence of human error and mechanical failure. The truth was elusive, buried beneath layers of rumor, assumption, and the impossibility of immediate verification. Social media played an equally dramatic role. Fans expressed fear, concern, and outrage. Messages of support poured in from across the globe, from ordinary citizens to celebrities. Yet, alongside genuine concern, there were threads of speculation, judgment, and relentless debate. Could this accident have been avoided? Was it a sign of recklessness? Were there deeper issues at play, tied to stress, mental health, or family tension? Each post added fuel to a fire that was impossible to contain. Within the palace, the media frenzy created a new dimension of pressure. Charles, William, and Kate were acutely aware that every word, every gesture, every public statement, or lack thereof, would be scrutinized. Advisors scrambled to manage the narrative, to ensure that no misinformation spread unchecked, and to protect the privacy and dignity of the family while maintaining a semblance of transparency. The tension between public perception and private reality became almost unbearable. In private, the royal family grappled with anger as well as fear. The relentless intrusion of cameras, microphones, and reporters into a moment of crisis was a stark reminder of the cost of their public roles. What should have been a space for focused care and emotional support had become a theater for global consumption. Even small gestures, like a wave from a window or a momentary sign of relief, were dissected by analysts, commentators, and armchair critics alike. The family's frustration was compounded by conflicting reports circulating in the media. Some sources claimed Harry's condition was critical, others suggested he was stable, and still others speculated wildly about his future and the potential long-term impact on the monarchy. The inconsistencies created a climate of anxiety not just within the family, but among the public, as each news story seemed to contradict the last. For the royals, the challenge was not merely emotional, it was strategic. How could they protect Harry, the family, and the monarchy from a narrative spinning out of control? Amidst the chaos, private conversations between family members and advisors became increasingly urgent. Charles and William debated the timing of statements, weighing the need for honesty against the potential consequences of revealing too much. Kate, while supporting both men emotionally, acted as a stabilizing force, advocating for measured responses that balanced caution with reassurance. These discussions were tense, sometimes heated, as the stakes were extraordinarily high. Every choice carried weight, every word could spark controversy, and every silence could be interpreted as complicity or indifference. Meanwhile, the public response continued to escalate. Fundraisers, memorial posts, and vigils appeared online, while fan pages and royal blogs dissected every detail. The mixture of fear, fascination, and outrage was palpable. Millions of people, many of whom had never met Harry, felt a personal connection to the crisis, a testament to the power of celebrity, narrative, and the global reach of modern media. In some ways, the public's attention became a secondary pressure on the family, amplifying the already intense emotional and logistical challenges. For Harry, aware in fragments of his surroundings, the media storm added another layer of distress. Though he was physically focused on recovery, he knew that the world was watching, analyzing, and judging. The weight of expectation, the scrutiny of his every decision, and the relentless speculation created a psychological strain that was almost as intense as the physical injuries he was enduring. Even in the sterile environment of the hospital, he could not escape the global gaze. One of the most striking aspects of the media frenzy was the rapid spread of misinformation. Early reports suggested that Harry had been involved in a high-speed chase. Others implied negligence or reckless behavior. Some outlets speculated on internal family conflicts, claiming that tensions with William or Charles had contributed to the accident. Each unverified claim amplified fear, confusion, and anxiety, creating an environment in which truth was difficult to discern and trust was fragile. The family's challenge was compounded by the psychological impact of public scrutiny. For Charles, there was the tension between parental fear and the demands of public duty. For William, it was the struggle between personal concern and the weight of responsibility. For Kate, it was a delicate balance of supporting both men while maintaining her own emotional resilience. Each of them had to navigate these pressures while also confronting their own grief, guilt, and frustration. As the day progressed, a new layer of tension emerged. Anonymous sources, purportedly close to the family, began leaking details to the press. Some were trivial, some were sensational, and some were misleading, designed to provoke attention and drive viewership. The palace responded cautiously, releasing carefully worded statements that emphasized concern for Harry while avoiding speculation. But in an age of instant communication and viral content, controlling the narrative was a near impossible task. What made the media frenzy particularly intense was the mixture of empathy and voyeurism. People were genuinely concerned for Harry's safety, yet they were also drawn to the drama, the tension, and the potential for scandal. This duality created a pressure cooker environment in which every update, no matter how small, was magnified, dissected, and debated endlessly. The royal family, already navigating a personal crisis, now faced the additional challenge of managing a global audience that demanded immediate answers, transparency, and reassurance, all while processing its own shock and fear. And then came the first major turning point in the public narrative. A news outlet reported, citing unnamed sources, that Harry's injuries were more severe than initially disclosed. Panic spread through social media like wildfire. Fans mobilized virtual vigils. Analysts debated the implications for the monarchy. Commentators speculated on everything from Harry's future health to the potential political fallout. For the family, this was a new level of stress. They were forced to confront the reality that even in the midst of a private crisis, the public interpretation of events could have profound consequences. Within the palace, tensions were high. Advisors debated how to respond, weighing the need to protect Harry's privacy against the risk of public panic. Charles, William, and Kate were caught between immediate emotional concern and the strategic considerations of public perception. Every decision, from who would speak to when, was critical. The balance between empathy, authority, and caution had never been more delicate. In these hours, the media frenzy revealed something deeper about the modern royal family. Their lives, while shielded in tradition and protocol, are ultimately subject to the scrutiny of an unrelenting public. Every choice, every misstep, and every private moment can become global news in an instant. For Harry, the accident was a stark reminder of this reality. For the family, it highlighted the challenge of navigating crisis in a world where information and misinformation travels at lightning speed. And yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of humanity that cut through the frenzy. Messages of support from other royals, private calls from close friends, and the quiet work of hospital staff all served as reminders that behind the headlines, real people were at stake. The media storm was loud, relentless, and often intrusive, but it could not fully overshadow the emotional reality of a family fighting for one of its own. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Behind the ornate walls of Buckingham Palace, away from the flashing cameras and the relentless media coverage, the royal family was grappling with a far more complex crisis than the accident itself. While the public fixated on headlines and speculation, Charles, William, and Kate were confronted with the raw, unfiltered reality of fear, guilt, and unresolved tensions that had lingered beneath the surface for years. What unfolded behind these closed doors revealed a side of the monarchy that the world rarely sees, a human story of love, fragility, and conflict. The palace corridors, usually echoing with the quiet steps of staff and ceremonial movements, were now filled with the low hum of anxiety. Advisors whispered updates from the hospital, security personnel moved with heightened alert, and the royals themselves were navigating a maze of emotion that demanded both composure and honesty. Charles paced, muttering under his breath, grappling with the panic that had taken hold of him. "I can't lose him," he whispered, voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would make the fear real. The king, accustomed to authority and control, now faced a situation where power meant nothing, and only vulnerability mattered. William, standing by a window overlooking the rain-slicked streets of London, was consumed by a different type of turmoil. The elder brother, often perceived as stoic and collected, was now confronting decades of unspoken tension with Harry. Their relationship, complicated by distance, past disagreements, and the weight of public scrutiny, had never been simple. And yet, in the shadow of potential loss, William felt the full force of his attachment, guilt, and the fear of what might never be reconciled. His jaw was clenched, his hands restless, as he replayed moments, conversations, and decisions that now seemed trivial, or perhaps tragically consequential. Kate Middleton, often the quiet stabilizing force, was deeply aware of the emotional fissures within the family. She moved silently between Charles and William, offering words of comfort and physical presence, her hands resting gently on shoulders, her voice calm and measured. But her composure was a delicate mask. Beneath it, she wrestled with her own fear, the weight of responsibility, and the knowledge that her role as peacemaker was both necessary and exhausting. She had to navigate not only her own emotions, but also the fragile egos, long-standing resentments, and the subtle power dynamics that had always existed between the men she loved and respected. What made this crisis uniquely difficult was that it forced every family member to confront vulnerabilities that had long been ignored or suppressed. Charles was grappling with the duality of being a father and a king, the need to manage public perception while privately fearing the loss of a son. William was confronting his complicated feelings toward Harry, love, rivalry, and the bitter pang of estrangement that had grown over the years. Kate was balancing her desire to support them both while maintaining her own emotional stability, recognizing that any misstep could exacerbate tensions or undermine the fragile peace holding the family together. In quiet moments, private conversations surfaced truths that had been simmering for years. Advisors relayed subtle observations from the hospital, noting not just Harry's condition, but the emotional reactions of family members. Charles, usually measured, had moments of tearful honesty, confiding fears and regrets that he had never voiced publicly. William expressed both anger and sorrow, struggling to reconcile the brother he knew with the man Harry had become. Kate, embodying both empathy and strategic calm, encouraged dialogue, patience, and understanding, while also silently carrying the emotional weight of the crisis herself. Underlying all of this was the question of reconciliation. How could a family navigate the delicate balance between public duty and private healing? The accident had stripped away the veneer of ceremony and protocol, leaving only raw human emotion. In those hours, past grievances, minor disagreements, misunderstandings, and unspoken resentments surfaced with startling clarity. Each interaction was charged with significance, every glance, word, and gesture carrying the weight of history. The family was forced to confront not just the immediate crisis but the cumulative effects of years of distance, miscommunication, and unaddressed conflict. Harry himself, though largely removed from these private discussions while under medical care, remained a central emotional force. Every update, every report of his condition, shaped the atmosphere within the palace. Advisors were careful in their phrasing, knowing that inaccurate details could inflame emotions or cause unnecessary panic. The emotional weight of anticipating Harry's recovery, or the potential for loss, was palpable, a pressure cooker that magnified both love and fear. The tension was not purely emotional. It also had practical dimensions. Decisions about hospital visits, media statements, and communications with other family members were fraught with difficulty. Should William or Charles be allowed to visit first? How would their presence affect Harry's emotional state? What information could be shared publicly without compromising the family's privacy? Every decision required careful deliberation, and yet, even the most calculated choices were underscored by raw, unpredictable human emotion. Throughout the palace, moments of silent reflection punctuated the chaos. Charles paused by a portrait of a younger Harry, remembering moments from his childhood. First steps, laughter echoing through hallways. The innocence of youth now contrasted starkly with the reality of adulthood and vulnerability. William, staring at a window, recalled shared adventures and arguments, moments of rivalry and connection that had defined their relationship. Kate, moving quietly between rooms, allowed herself brief, private moments to process her own fear, the weight of responsibility, and the hope that they could all navigate the crisis with dignity and resilience. The staff within the palace were acutely aware of the emotional intensity surrounding them. They moved with quiet precision, anticipating needs, offering support, and observing tensions with an almost clinical awareness. Their role was both practical and emotional, serving as the bridge between the family's internal turmoil and the external pressures of public expectation. In many ways, the palace staff were silent witnesses to a family confronting its own humanity, grappling with emotions that had long been hidden behind titles, protocol, and media narratives. As hours passed, subtle shifts began to occur. Conversations that might have previously been avoided or stifled emerged, fueled by the urgency and gravity of the moment. Charles expressed fears he had long suppressed. William acknowledged moments of misunderstanding and regret. Kate guided discussions with empathy, ensuring that communication remained constructive even amidst intense emotion. These interactions, though painful and difficult, began to lay the groundwork for a fragile sense of reconciliation. Yet, even as private struggles unfolded, there was a constant awareness of the external world. Every statement, every visible emotion, could be captured, interpreted, and broadcast to millions. The family's private pain existed alongside the relentless gaze of public scrutiny, a dual reality that heightened the stakes of every interaction. The tension between personal vulnerability and public expectation was omnipresent, shaping the emotional landscape in ways that were invisible to outsiders but deeply consequential for those inside the palace walls. In this crucible of fear, love, and regret, the royals confronted questions that had long been unspoken. What does it mean to be a family when public duties overshadow personal bonds? How can forgiveness and understanding be cultivated in an environment defined by scrutiny and expectation? And how can they navigate a crisis that is as emotional as it is practical, where every decision carries weight and every moment is infused with consequence? And then, as if the universe demanded another test of resilience, a revelation arrived. A subtle detail about the accident, the circumstances surrounding it, and Harry's personal state that none of them had anticipated. The information was both surprising and deeply troubling, adding another layer of complexity to an already volatile emotional landscape. It forced Charles, William, and Kate to reassess their understanding of the situation, to confront not just the immediate crisis but the broader implications for their family relationships and the dynamics that had long defined them. What came next would push the family to their limits, emotionally, mentally, and strategically. The private struggles they were enduring would intersect with public perception, media scrutiny, and the evolving narrative of Harry's condition, creating a perfect storm that would test loyalty, love, and resilience like never before. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. By the early hours of the morning, the gravity of Prince Harry's condition began to crystallize for the royal family. Reports from the hospital were both reassuring and alarming, a delicate balance that kept Charles, William, and Kate teetering between hope and despair. Harry's injuries were serious, involving multiple fractures and internal trauma, but he was stable. Yet stability, the doctors cautioned, was fragile. Even the slightest complication could shift the situation dramatically, and every hour mattered. While medical staff focused on his physical recovery, the family began confronting a cascade of truths that had long been buried beneath layers of tradition, pride, and public expectation. The accident, it seemed, had acted as a catalyst, not only exposing Harry's vulnerability, but also unearthing secrets and unresolved tensions that had been quietly shaping the family's dynamics for years. In many ways, the hospital room became a crucible, forcing clarity and honesty in a way that public ceremonies, interviews, and royal duties never had. One of the first revelations was about the circumstances of the accident itself. Initial reports had suggested a simple collision, a lapse in attention, or a minor misjudgment on a wet street. But a deeper investigation revealed subtleties that no one anticipated. There were questions about vehicle maintenance, unexpected road hazards, and even the timing of Harry's travel that evening. More significantly, some details hinted at decisions and distractions on Harry's part, moments of vulnerability that illuminated not only the physical causes of the accident, but the emotional and psychological pressures he had been navigating. The family was forced to absorb these revelations with a mixture of relief, guilt, and concern. Charles, in particular, wrestled with paternal anguish, reflecting on whether he had done enough to guide and protect his son. William confronted feelings of both worry and unresolved frustration, questioning whether estrangement or past disagreements had indirectly contributed to the situation. Kate, striving to maintain composure, focused on mediation and reassurance, guiding both men toward constructive reflection even as her own heart was heavy with concern. Adding to the complexity were personal secrets that surfaced as the family navigated Harry's condition. For years, certain tensions and grievances had been quietly simmering. Miscommunications, unmet expectations, and private frustrations that had never been fully expressed. In the pressure cooker of this crisis, these hidden truths emerged, sometimes in whispered conversations, sometimes in sudden outbursts. Each revelation, though small in isolation, added emotional weight, layering guilt, empathy, and understanding onto an already fraught situation. Harry's own vulnerabilities became apparent in ways that were both poignant and unsettling. Though physically resilient, he had been carrying emotional burdens, stress, isolation, and the relentless pressure of public scrutiny that had never been fully acknowledged. Friends and aides later described him as unusually withdrawn in the hours leading up to the accident, a quiet restlessness that had hinted at inner turmoil. The accident, in this sense, was not merely a physical event but a symptom of deeper emotional strain, one that now demanded attention alongside his immediate medical needs. In the palace, these revelations prompted intense private discussions. Charles, William, and Kate debated how much to disclose to the public versus how much to keep private, recognizing that transparency could foster empathy, but also expose the family to scrutiny and criticism. Every choice had consequences, both for Harry's recovery and for the broader narrative surrounding the monarchy. The stakes were unprecedented, personal, familial, and public all at once. As the day progressed, further secrets began to surface. Advisors revealed information about Harry's personal routines, mental health considerations, and recent decisions that had been kept from even the closest family members. Some details were mundane. Others were deeply revealing, shedding light on the pressures, fears, and decisions that had shaped his life. For Charles and William, these revelations prompted reflection and, in some cases, regret. For Kate, they reinforced the delicate role she played as mediator, confidant, and emotional anchor. Throughout the hospital, the intersection of physical vulnerability and emotional exposure was palpable. Harry's condition became a lens through which the family examined their relationships, responsibilities, and personal histories. Every update from doctors, every new piece of information, carried emotional resonance far beyond its clinical significance. For the royals, the event was not only a crisis of health, but a mirror reflecting decades of unspoken truths and complex dynamics. Perhaps the most dramatic revelation concerned Harry's own acknowledgement of his fears. In moments of clarity, he expressed gratitude for the family's support, but also confessed feelings of isolation and the toll of public life. These admissions, rare and deeply human, shifted the emotional tone in the palace. Charles, William, and Kate were confronted not just with the physical consequences of the accident, but with the unseen burdens Harry had carried alone.